He sat outside the bank every day for 2 years, holding a cardboard sign. People walked past without looking. They saw a homeless man asking for change. But when 3 armed gunmen stormed Chicago First National Bank with 30 hostages inside, those same people discovered they'd been ignoring a Marine Scout sniper for 24 months. Welcome to Daily Soldier Stories. Before we begin this incredible story of hidden heroism, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who served in silence. Corner of LaSalle and Madison, downtown Chicago. Every morning at 7:30 a.m., Marcus Thompson took his position on the concrete steps across from Chicago First National Bank. Same spot every day for exactly 732 days, 2 years of watching the world go by. He had a piece of cardboard worn soft from handling with words written in fading black marker. Veteran, anything helps, God bless. Next to him sat a small backpack containing everything he owned, a water bottle, a torn blanket, and a small metal box he never opened. Marcus was 52 years old, but looked older. His hair was gray and unkempt, his beard long and scraggly. His clothes were layers of donated items that didn't quite fit. To everyone passing by, he was invisible, just another homeless person in a city full of them. The bank employees knew him by sight, but not by name. They walked past him every morning, some dropping change, others avoiding eye contact completely. He never spoke unless spoken to. He never asked for more than what people offered. He just sat there, quietly, watching. "There's the bank guy again," Sarah, a young teller, would say to her coworkers as they entered through the glass doors. She'd been working there for 6 months, and Marcus had been there every single day. "I feel bad for him," replied Janet, the assistant manager. "But what can you do? The city has programs." They didn't know his story. They didn't know that Marcus came to that exact corner for a reason that had nothing to do with the bank's generosity. Across the street, barely visible between buildings, stood the Jesse Brown VA Medical Center. The place where Staff Sergeant Michael Chen, Marcus's spotter and best friend, had died 3 years ago from cancer caused by toxic exposure overseas. Marcus came to that corner every day to be close to the last place he'd seen his brother alive. The money wasn't important. The connection was. Marcus had a routine. Arrive at 7:30, position himself where he could see both the bank and the VA hospital. He would watch the morning rush of bank employees, the early customers, the security guards changing shifts. Most people assumed he was just watching for handouts, but Marcus was doing something else entirely. He was observing. Old habits from 12 years in the Marine Corps don't disappear just because you're wearing civilian clothes and sleeping in shelters. His eyes tracked patterns, which employees arrived when, how many security guards worked each shift, where the cameras were positioned, which customers were regulars. Not because he was planning anything. Because observation was how Marcus Thompson stayed alive for 3 tours in Afghanistan. It was who he was. The bank had 3 security guards who rotated shifts. 2 were ex-military. Marcus could tell by the way they carried themselves. The third was younger, probably never served. There were 4 tellers, 2 loan officers, and a branch manager. Peak hours were 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Busiest day was Friday. Quietest was Tuesday morning. Marcus knew all this not because he cared about the bank's operations, but because his mind automatically cataloged threat assessments wherever he went. It was a survival mechanism that had kept him alive in Helmand Province and never shut off, even on a peaceful Chicago street corner. At lunchtime, Marcus would walk 2 blocks to the VA hospital, sit in the lobby for exactly 1 hour, then return to his corner. The hospital staff knew him too. They'd tried to get him into housing programs, addiction counseling, job training. Marcus always politely declined. He wasn't ready to leave his post. Dr. Patricia Williams, a psychiatrist at the VA, had spoken with him several times. "Marcus, we have resources. You don't have to live on the street." "I'm where I need to be, Doc," he'd always reply. "Mike's watching over things here. I can't leave yet." She understood. Survivor's guilt was common among veterans. Some men needed time to process loss in their own way. As long as Marcus wasn't hurting himself or others, she respected his choice. Tuesday, March 15th, 2:47 p.m. Marcus was in his usual position when he noticed the black SUV with tinted windows circle the block twice. Old instincts kicked in. In Afghanistan, vehicles that circled an area were conducting surveillance before an attack. 3 men got out of the SUV, all wearing dark jackets despite the warm weather, all walking with purpose toward the bank's front entrance. Marcus's trained eye caught details civilians would miss, the way they positioned themselves to cover different angles, the slight bulge under their jackets, the fact that none of them made eye contact with pedestrians. Marcus felt his pulse quicken, not from fear, but from recognition. He'd seen this type of coordinated movement before. These weren't customers. The 3 men entered the bank simultaneously. Through the large windows, Marcus could see them spread out inside. Then he heard it. A woman's scream, quickly cut short. The few people on the sidewalk stopped and looked toward the bank, confused. Marcus was already moving. He stood up slowly, his eyes never leaving the bank windows. Inside, he could see customers and employees dropping to the floor. One of the gunmen was at the teller counter, another near the loan officer desks, the third controlling the entrance. A professional operation, well coordinated. These weren't desperate junkies looking for quick cash. These were experienced criminals. Marcus reached into his backpack and pulled out the small metal box he never opened. Inside were items from his military service, his dog tags, a photo of his unit, and something else. A small notebook with detailed sketches and measurements he'd made over the past 2 years, floor plans of the bank, entry and exit points, security camera positions, guard stations. Not because he'd ever planned to use them, but because Marcus Thompson couldn't turn off 12 years of Marine training. He'd been unconsciously conducting surveillance on that building for 732 days. And now, for the first time since he'd come home from Afghanistan, that training was about to save lives. Marcus moved to a position where he could see all the bank windows clearly. His mind automatically shifted into combat mode, processing information with the clarity that had made him one of the Marine Corps' most effective scout snipers. 3 hostiles inside, approximately 30 civilians on the floor. No immediate signs of injury, which meant the gunmen wanted compliance, not casualties. Yet. Through the windows, he could see the lead gunman shouting orders while pointing an assault rifle. The other 2 were positioning themselves to control different sections of the bank. Classic hostage containment formation. Marcus pulled out a cell phone, one of the few possessions he'd kept from his previous life. He dialed 911. 911? What's your emergency? This is Marcus Thompson, former Staff Sergeant USMC. Armed robbery in progress at Chicago First National Bank, corner of LaSalle and Madison. 3 suspects with automatic weapons, approximately 30 hostages. Suspects appear professional and organized. Sir, officers are being dispatched. Please stay away from the building. Marcus hung up. The 911 operator was doing her job, but she didn't understand. Police would arrive, set up a perimeter, call in SWAT, negotiate. Standard procedure for a hostage situation. It would take hours. Inside the bank, Marcus could see one of the hostages, an elderly woman, appearing to have some kind of medical episode. She was clutching her chest, falling over. The gunman nearest to her looked agitated, pointing his weapon at other customers, shouting for someone to help her. The situation was escalating. In Marcus's experience, agitated gunmen made mistakes, and mistakes got innocent people killed. He studied the building layout he'd memorized over 2 years. Main entrance was controlled by the gunmen. But there was a service entrance on the east side, used by cleaning crews and armored car pickups. Marcus had watched that entrance for months. It was usually unlocked during business hours. The bank's security system had cameras at all entrances, but Marcus had noticed a blind spot near the service door, an area where the camera angle was blocked by a support pillar. Marcus had another advantage the gunman didn't know about. For 2 years, he'd observed the bank's routines so closely that he knew the building better than some of the employees. Time to put that knowledge to use. Marcus walked around the block to approach the service entrance from the blind spot he'd identified. His movements were deliberate and calm, not the behavior of a panicked civilian, but the controlled advance of a trained operator. As he moved, his mind processed the tactical situation. 3 hostiles meant they probably had different specialties, one leader giving orders, one controlling the money operation, one watching for external threats. That third one would be positioned to watch the main entrance and street approach. The service entrance was exactly where Marcus expected it to be, unlocked and unguarded. The gunmen had focused their attention on the main banking floor, not considering secondary access points. Marcus entered the building through a maintenance corridor he'd seen cleaning crews use. The hallway led to the back offices and eventually connected to the main banking floor. He'd watched employees take this route countless times during his surveillance. Moving silently through the corridor, Marcus could hear voices from the main floor. The lead gunman was shouting demands at the bank manager, something about opening the vault. His voice was stressed, impatient, not a good sign. Marcus reached a position where he could observe the main floor through a partially open office door. The scene was exactly what he'd assessed from outside. 3 armed men in tactical positions, approximately 30 hostages on the floor, several employees behind the teller counter being forced to open cash drawers. But now, Marcus could see details that made the situation more critical. One of the gunmen was wearing a suicide vest. This wasn't just a robbery, it was a statement. These men weren't planning to negotiate their way out. The elderly woman who'd been having medical problems was unconscious on the floor. A young mother was holding her infant, trying to keep the baby quiet. 2 bank security guards were zip-tied near the entrance, one of them bleeding from a head wound. Marcus felt the familiar calm that came over him before engaging the enemy. His breathing slowed, his pulse steadied. 12 years of combat training and 47 confirmed kills in Afghanistan had prepared him for exactly this moment. He reached into his backpack and pulled out the last item from his metal box, something he'd kept from his service days, wrapped in cloth at the bottom of his kit. A K-bar combat knife, still sharp, still balanced, still ready. Marcus moved through the back offices with the silence of a professional. Each step was calculated, each movement designed to avoid detection. He had learned this skill clearing buildings in Fallujah and perfected it during reconnaissance missions in the Afghan mountains. The bank's layout was exactly as he'd memorized it, past the customer service desks, through the manager's office, around the corner to the main floor. But Marcus wasn't going directly to the gunman. First, he needed to improve the odds. Near the manager's office was the bank's main electrical panel. Marcus had noticed it during his months of observation when maintenance workers had accessed it. One advantage of being invisible: people do their jobs around you as if you're not even there. He opened the panel and studied the circuit breakers. In 10 seconds, he could plunge the entire bank into darkness. But that would create chaos, and chaos with automatic weapons meant dead civilians. Instead, Marcus identified the circuits that controlled the front entrance security doors and the customer area lighting. He flipped those specific breakers, leaving the back offices and emergency lighting operational. The effect was immediate. The main banking floor dimmed significantly, and the electronic locks on the front entrance engaged. The gunmen were now operating in reduced visibility and couldn't easily escape through their primary exit. "What the hell?" Marcus heard one of the gunmen shout. "Check the power." "It's just the lights," another voice responded. "Keep moving." Marcus smiled grimly. They thought it was an electrical malfunction. They had no idea they were now being hunted by someone who'd spent 3 years hunting Taliban fighters in mountains and caves. Moving closer to the main floor, Marcus could see the gunman more clearly. The leader was about 30 years old, professional demeanor, clearly military or law enforcement trained. The second was younger, nervous, probably the weak link. The third was older, calmer. He wore the suicide vest and seemed prepared to die. That made him the most dangerous and the priority target. Marcus needed to separate them. In his experience, professional criminals worked best as a team. Alone, they made mistakes. From his position in the back offices, Marcus could hear police sirens approaching outside. The gunman heard them too. "Cops are here," the younger gunman called out, his voice showing strain. "Stay calm," the leader commanded. "We knew this would happen. Stick to the plan." Marcus realized he had a brief window before police established their perimeter and the situation became a formal standoff. Once SWAT arrived, they'd want to control all variables, including any civilians in the building. He needed to act while he still had freedom of movement. He moved to a position where he could see the older gunman with the suicide vest. The man was positioned near the center of the hostages, his finger on what appeared to be a dead man's switch. If anything happened to him, he could take everyone in the bank with him. Marcus had encountered suicide bombers in Afghanistan. The key was to neutralize the threat before they could trigger the device. It required precision, speed, and absolute commitment. But first, he needed to create a distraction. Marcus moved to the bank's phone system and called the main number from an internal line. The phone rang at the customer service desk, near where the younger gunman was positioned. The gunman looked at the ringing phone, confused. He gestured to one of the hostages, a bank employee. "Answer it," he commanded, pointing his weapon at her. The employee picked up the phone with shaking hands. "To Chicago First National." Marcus spoke in a calm, professional voice. "This is Staff Sergeant Marcus Thompson, United States Marine Corps. You have 3 seconds to get away from the woman with the baby." The employee's eyes went wide. She looked around frantically, not understanding. "Who is this?" the young gunman demanded, grabbing the phone. Marcus's voice came through clearly. "You're out of your league, son. This is what a real operator sounds like." The gunman spun around, trying to locate the source of the voice. His movement took him 2 steps away from the group of hostages, exactly what Marcus needed. From his concealed position, Marcus threw the KABAR knife with the precision that had made him a legend in his unit. The blade caught the younger gunman in the shoulder, spinning him around and causing him to drop his weapon. The sound of the gunman's scream and the clatter of his rifle hitting the floor caused instant chaos. Hostages started screaming. The leader spun toward the commotion. The older gunman with the suicide vest tensed, his hand moving toward the trigger. Marcus was already moving before the knife had reached its target. Marcus emerged from cover, moving faster than any 52-year-old homeless man should have been able to move. His approach was silent, professional, lethal. The leader turned just in time to see a gray-haired man in tattered clothes, closing distance at an impossible speed. He raised his assault rifle, but Marcus was already inside his firing arc. 12 years of Marine combat training took over. Marcus grabbed the rifle barrel with his left hand, redirecting it away from the hostages, while driving his right elbow into the gunman's throat. The man dropped immediately, gasping for air. But Marcus's real target was the suicide bomber. The older gunman had seen his partners go down and was reaching for his detonator. Marcus covered the 15 feet between them in less than 3 seconds, diving over a group of prone hostages. He tackled the bomber from behind, wrapping his left arm around the man's throat while grabbing his right wrist, the hand holding the dead man's switch. The key was to maintain pressure on the switch while neutralizing the threat. "Let go of the device," Marcus said quietly, applying a chokehold he'd learned in hand-to-hand combat training. The bomber struggled, trying to trigger the vest, but Marcus held his wrist in an iron grip. Years of manual labor and military conditioning had kept his strength intact, despite living on the streets. "You military?" the bomber gasped. "Marines don't leave anyone behind," Marcus replied, tightening his grip. The man went unconscious in seconds. Marcus carefully removed the detonator and secured the suicide vest, using techniques he'd learned from explosive ordnance disposal teams in Afghanistan. Within minutes, the immediate threat was neutralized. 3 gunmen down, no civilian casualties, bomb threat contained. Marcus stood up slowly, looking around at the hostages who were now staring at him in complete shock. The homeless man they'd walked past for 2 years had just saved their lives. Police burst through the front entrance just as Marcus finished securing the weapons. SWAT officers in full tactical gear spread out through the bank, expecting to find an active hostage situation. Instead, they found 3 subdued suspects, a disarmed bomb, and 30 terrified but unharmed civilians. And standing in the middle of it all was a man who looked like he belonged on a park bench, not a battlefield. "Hands up! Get on the ground!" the SWAT team leader shouted. Marcus slowly raised his hands but remained standing. "Staff Sergeant Marcus Thompson, USMC, retired. Situation is secure. 3 suspects neutralized, explosive device disarmed. The team leader paused, clearly confused by the professional terminology coming from someone who looked homeless. Sarah, the young bank teller who'd walked past Marcus every day for 6 months, was helped to her feet by paramedics. She looked at him with complete bewilderment. You were just... How did you... Marcus picked up his cardboard sign from where he'd dropped it near the entrance. Ma'am, I was just doing what I was trained to do. Detective Lisa Rodriguez arrived on scene and immediately took charge of the situation. She'd been a police officer for 15 years and had never seen anything like this. Sir, I need to understand what happened here, she said to Marcus. Marcus gestured toward the 3 suspects, now being treated by paramedics. 3-man professional crew, military trained, attempting armed robbery with a suicide bomb backup plan. Poor intelligence gathering. They didn't account for external observation. External observation? Marcus pointed toward the window where his corner was visible. I've been watching this building for 2 years, Detective. I know every entrance, every camera angle, every employee routine. When these men started their operation, they became my mission. Detective Rodriguez studied Marcus more carefully. Despite his appearance, everything about his posture and speech indicated military background. What's your background, Mr. Thompson? 12 years, United States Marine Corps, Scout Sniper, 3 tours, Afghanistan, 47 confirmed kills, retired 2018. The detective's expression changed. She'd worked with enough veterans to recognize the real thing when she saw it. As EMTs checked the hostages for injuries and crime scene investigators processed evidence, Detective Rodriguez sat down with Marcus on the steps outside the bank, the same steps where he'd spent the last 2 years. Mr. Thompson, I have to ask, why were you living on the street? With your service record, you qualify for benefits, housing assistance. Marcus looked across the street toward the VA hospital. My spotter, Mike Chen, died over there 3 years ago. Cancer from burn pit exposure overseas. I promised him I'd stay close until I figured out how to move forward. So you've been homeless for 3 years? Not homeless, Detective, on watch. Mike saved my life 17 times in Afghanistan. I owed him a proper vigil. The detective nodded, understanding more than Marcus realized. Her brother had served in Iraq and struggled with similar issues. What happens now? She asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching paramedics wheel the elderly woman who'd had the medical episode into an ambulance. She was conscious now, and her family was with her. I think my watch is over, he said finally. Dr. Patricia Williams from the VA arrived at the scene after hearing about the incident on the news. She'd been working with Marcus for 3 years, trying to help him transition back to civilian life. Marcus, she said, approaching carefully. Are you all right? He looked at her with clearer eyes than she'd seen in years. Doc, I think I'm ready to talk about that housing program now. Later that evening, local news stations ran the story of the homeless veteran who'd stopped a bank robbery. But they got it wrong, as they usually did. They called it a story about a down-and-out man who found his purpose again. Marcus knew better. He'd never lost his purpose. He'd just been waiting for the right mission. 6 months later, Marcus Thompson was living in a small apartment 3 blocks from the VA hospital. He'd taken a job as a security consultant, helping banks and businesses improve their threat assessment procedures. Every morning at 7:30, he still walked past Chicago First National Bank. But now he was wearing clean clothes and carrying a briefcase instead of a cardboard sign. Sarah, the bank teller, always waved to him from behind the glass doors. Janet, the assistant manager, had nominated him for a Civilian Heroism Award from the city. Marcus never applied for the medal. He'd done what any Marine would do, protect civilians and complete the mission. On the anniversary of the bank incident, a small plaque was installed on the corner where Marcus had kept his vigil. In honor of those who serve in silence, SSGT. Marcus Thompson, USMC Semper Fidelis means forever. But the most important change wasn't the recognition or the apartment or the job. It was that Marcus had finally visited Mike Chen's grave at Arlington National Cemetery and said the words he'd been carrying for 3 years. Mission complete, brother. I'm ready to come home. Some heroes wear uniforms, others wear medals, but the rarest heroes wear invisibility like armor, protecting a world that doesn't know they exist. Marcus Thompson spent 2 years being ignored, overlooked, dismissed as just another homeless veteran. But when the moment came, those same people discovered that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one nobody notices. So now I ask you, have you ever walked past someone and failed to see who they really were? Share their story in the comments. Let us know what city you're watching from today. And remember to subscribe to Daily Soldier Stories, because every day there are heroes among us, waiting quietly for their moment to serve. See you in the next story. And remember, the person you ignore today might be the one who saves your life tomorrow.